For this text mining application, we're going to be comparing the word frequency patterns of different authors. So we're going to compare 2 books by Jane Austen, Mansfield Park and Sense and Sensibility, and we're going to compare 2 books of Herman Melville, Moby Dick and Piazza Tales. This is based on a lab by Andrew Chisholm of Information Gain Limited in the UK called Empirical Zipf Mandelbrot Variation for Sequential Windows Within Documents. It's based on a paper written by Andrew Chisholm on this type of text mining comparison. The idea is, of course, to see if the word frequency variations as shown by the Zipf Mandelbrot distribution are more similar within a particular author's work and more different from that author's work to another author's work. So we'll be comparing these 2 authors. I will show you how to take one of the books and to prepare them to get it ready and imported properly into a repository in RapidMiner, and then you can do it with the other books as well. So I'm going to search here for Sense and Sensibility. And here it is, Sense and Sensibility. Doesn't really matter which one you're going to download. We want a plain text download. So we want a plain text one right here. And this is going to be downloaded. I'm going to save as. I have actually already saved it. I have saved it as Austen Sense and Sensibility.txt. So I have several Austen books that I have saved. I have some Arthur Conan Doyle books that I have saved and some Herman Melville books that I have saved. So I'm not going to save this here, but that's what you would do. So this is a plain text file that we have now saved. Let's open up the text file that we have saved. You can open it up with really any text processor. I'll just open it up with Word right now because that's probably what most people will have easily available. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all the licensing and introductory stuff before. I want to be left with just the text. And I'll go down to the very bottom. There's extra Gutenberg organization licensing. Right here to where it says the end. I think I'll also get rid of the chapter headings. It's case sensitive. Using wildcards. There might be 2 characters for the chapter number. Alright. Let's just scroll down and see if we've gotten rid of any chapters. Looks like we have. No chapter numbers, plain old text. And we're going to save this now. Plain text file. The next thing we want to do is to get this ready for use in RapidMiner. Just to make life easier for myself, I'm going to copy this and paste it into my repository. You don't need to. It needs to be anyway opened and stored in the repository explicitly, but just to make its location the same as where I will find all of my other data. Now you can see that I've already worked with Mansfield Park, which is another of Jane Austen's books, because not only is the text file here, but these are file types that are used by RapidMiner, the properties files and these other file types, when I officially stored this in the repository. So even though I have this in my repository directory, it's just a text file that's placed there. RapidMiner isn't really recognizing this just yet. So you might think, well, when we did this with our other repositories for other data files and processes it did. That is correct. And for storing documents this way, it does not. So you have to actually open and store it. So what we're going to do here. This is the repository that I told you to create, the TextMining Zipf repository. We have data over here. Full texts. And notice that even though I had Mansfield Park and I also have Sense and Sensibility, even if I refresh this, it's not showing up in that folder. And that's because it needs to be actually stored there. So I created a process for storing something. So I call this one Store Mansfield Park. Now again, I'm doing each one of these explicitly just so that we can really explicitly see all the different processes. Clearly, you don't have to do it that way. You could have one process and just handle everything like variables with just certain values that you can supply. But I'm going to do each one explicitly. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy what I did before, and I'll paste it. And it says copy of Store Mansfield Park, which I will now rename. And I'm doing it this way so you can see some of the different things you can do. And I'll call this process Store Sense. I'll just call it Sense. It stands for Sense and Sensibility, the name of the book. I'll double click on this and it will bring up the process. And when I click on Open File, parameters are what kind of resource I want. I want a file. And where is it going to find it? Well, it's going to find it in my repositories, under TextMining Zipf, under Data, under Full Texts, under Austin, and here is the Sense and Sensibility text file. And then I want to store it. And it's going to say where, in what repository do you want to store it. Even though it's in that repositories folder in Windows Explorer or in Finder, you still have to officially make it recognizable from within RapidMiner as part of a repository. So here's how you do that. Find what repository that it should be recognized in. TextMining, Data, Full Text, Austin, and Austin Sense. Let's refresh that folder. And after you have done that correctly, here in our, let's make it clearer where this is. In our TextMining Zipf repository, under Data, where we said it would be, under Full Texts, under Austin, you not only have Mansfield Park, you now have Sense and Sensibility, the text file, recognized within the repository in RapidMiner, not just present in that folder. We're now ready to start processing the Mansfield Park text, and then we're going to process the Sense and Sensibility text. Now again, I have set things up with completely separate processes, just because it's easier to work with the process context the way that I wanted to show you the process context this way, but you really could use the same one and simply change the process context each time that you run it. Since I know that later in this process I'm going to want to do the same thing with two of Herman Melville's books, I went ahead and added another subfolder to Full Text called Melville. I took the Moby Dick and Piazza Tales books off of the Gutenberg project and also stripped them of chapters and anything that wasn't the actual text. And I am now going to put those into RapidMiner as well. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy what I just did for Sense. I'll copy the entire set of processes. And I'll paste this in my TextMining Zipf repository. And I'll just give it another name. This is just a shortcut kind of way. I'm just going to rename it, and I will call it Processes Melville Moby Dick. Under the subfolder of Store Full Text, I have a Store Sense process. I'm going to rename that Store Moby Dick. And I'm going to change the file so that it's going to point to the Moby Dick file. So this is no longer under Austin, Full Texts, under Melville. It's now going to open the Moby Dick text. You'll notice that under my Data, under TextMining Zipf, I have Data. And right now it just has Full Texts, Austin. And even if I refresh that, it's not showing me the Melville. That's because, again, in my folders on Windows Explorer, I have a Melville subfolder, but I need to have one here too in my repositories. So I'm going to create a subfolder. I call it Melville. So it's kind of mirroring. I'm constantly mirroring what I have done in my repository and what I have done in my Windows Explorer or in Finder. When you are creating a repository and that repository really already exists in full on your Windows Explorer, the way we have kind of done it the cheater's way that I had you do it in orientation, this will often not have to be done. But we're doing this after this repository has already been created, so we're going to have to create our subfolders themselves. And so I want them to reflect the way that Windows Explorer is set up. Now that my repository has a subfolder called Melville, I have opened my file from the Windows file. See, this is Windows Explorer here. I said I wanted the Moby Dick text from there. Now I'm ready to store that into a repository. See, this is not a file location, it's a repository entry. So now my repository entry for text Zipf does indeed show a Melville subfolder. I don't want it to be Austin Sense, I want it to be Moby Dick. Now I'll run this, and it's telling me that it has gotten this file. Now if I refresh this, you can see the little arrow there already. I shouldn't even have to refresh it. And there's Moby Dick. I'm going to do the same for the Piazza Tales, which is another Melville book, and then we'll be able to run our processes on both Austin books and see how similar those look to each other, and then we're going to run our processes on both Melville books, see how similar those look to each other, and see if the Austin books patterns look different than the Melville books patterns. Once again, I'm going to copy this entire processes folder, and again, there's better ways of doing this, but I want to be able to see them all here explicitly. I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to rename it. Processes Melville Piazza. It's actually Piazza Tales. Instead of storing Moby Dick, I want to store Piazza Tales. So let me rename this over here. And let me make sure that the file that I'm going to open, and again, this is from Windows, it's a file location over here. So you can see the file location there. Is Piazza Tales. And the place that I want to store it is going to be again in Data Full Text Melville. And I don't have to create that folder because I've already created that folder for Moby Dick. I'll simply place this into that same folder. And again, you can arrange your folders differently if you want. I was trying to do it so that you could see really explicitly where everything is. Piazza. And let's run that. And sure enough, under Melville, I have Moby Dick and the Piazza Tales. So I've got, my books are ready to run. And the next thing we're going to do is actually start running these processes.